We may have a couple people come in late, as that is our way, and it will only upset me a little bit. What we're going to do today, I'm going to go ahead and kill the lights. We need to get into this as quickly as we can, but I will talk to you for just a minute. That's pretty good. It kind of sucks. There was no way to do it otherwise, but I like to do the 2 classes we're doing where we just watch scenes and talk about them in a week, right? I think it's good to just have them in that 1 week. Unfortunately, given the construction of the syllabus and the semester, I had to give you a weekend in between. It just sucks. Like it's not as fresh in your mind. So hopefully, diving into this first scene and talking about it, there's important stuff in this scene that I want to consider. We're going to look at Holly, especially in this first scene. But if, for instance, any ideas kind of spring to mind, or you start remembering things we talked about, or thoughts you had in your discussion, put anything at all, if you feel like it bears bringing up in class, for sure do that. You will remind other people, you may spark other conversation. Let's have a day, right? What we're looking at in this nondescript, this is the end of one scene. This is the bad guys coming. They're in a truck and they're bad. But we're mostly concerned with the scene right after this. McClane is in Holly's office now, and he's immediately more comfortable, and you'll see what I'm talking about as soon as we get to the scene. Like, oh yeah, he looks more comfy. So that's interesting, because we talked about that last time. But mainly what I want to focus on in this first scene, you learn a lot about not just each one of these characters, but them together. Obviously, their relationship isn't great at the moment. We talked about that, and it's pretty clear. But also, obviously, I think to be fair, you got to remember, McClane didn't come out here for no reason. I mean, he pretty clearly flew across the country to a place where he's terribly uncomfortable to try to fix this, right? At least that would be the most logical reason. And I'm interested, with all that in mind, watch this scene. We're going to see how it goes. Okay, because I mean, the speakers are, so anyway. All right, to begin with, anything at all you notice? There's a lot in this scene. Mostly conversation, but there's some visual phenomena as well, I suppose. Just anything at all stood out to you as potentially interesting.
Well, it starts out good. They're in a good mood.
I'm trying to decide how to dive into that. Yeah, I mean, clearly, how do you know that initially things could go well? A couple things happen. What happens?
She invites him to stay at the house.
Kids would love to have you, leaning on the Christmas stuff, and we got a spare room, so you don't have to worry. Obviously, shit is super weird if that's the best case scenario. If your wife is like, we have a spare room, you could stay, husband, right? So things aren't 100% great, but not saying you can stay, that's good. That feels like progress, yeah? And then she doubles down. And there's a couple things that happen in between that we're going to talk about in a minute. Did anybody catch what she says? A very important thing. She whispers it.
I miss you.
I missed you. She says it just like that. Like, oh. Right?
Kind of longing.
She wants it. Feels like progress too. How does he respond to that? Very important what he says.
I guess you did miss her last night.
Oh, no. Especially when what? He doubles down. What does he say? You don't miss my last name, and then he says, especially when, or maybe not when you're signing checks. Oh my God. And then things take a turn. Yeah? They get acrimonious. SAT word of the day just means bad, basically. And they get heated. They have it becomes a fight. And it pretty clearly, due to a couple things they say, is a fight that they had already. So it's basically been an ongoing disagreement. This is the $1 million question, and this could be hard to pick out. Because first of all, whatever you might think about Bruce Willis and, I'm forgetting her name right now, but Holly as actors, they crush this scene. I don't know if you've been in a relationship spat, but the way they talk just to where we can hear both of them, but they also kind of talk over each other really quick. They nail that. I've been in a few of those. They nail that. What are they fighting about? There's one thing. They say it. I was wondering if you caught it.
Well, she says, like, I know what your idea of our marriage is. It's kind of like the preconceived notions each other may have.
Good. All right, so specifically, what are they arguing about?
Ideas of marriage.
And they seem to differ. She wants one thing, and apparently he wants another. And he claims that that's not the case, like that she's misunderstanding him. And another thing I like about this scene, she's being a very, I would say conciliatory, right? When he brings up the last name, she knows that's going to be a problem, and that's pretty clear because she didn't tell him to begin with, right? It's a Japanese, she's using that same soft language. These are all like things you could talk about in a paper, right? It's not just what's said, it's how it's said. She's speaking very softly. You'll notice if you watch it back, and for the sake of time we're not, but she's not looking at him when she's saying this. She's like playing with shit on the desk, kind of in a nervous way, like trying to not make it a fight, right? And as soon as he says, you don't have any idea, or what it, like, you don't know what my idea of a marriage should be, she looks dead at him. And her voice changes, her inflection changes. She means this. And the camera turns so we can see her face, and like all of a sudden she's not deflecting anymore. Like she's like, fuck you, I know exactly what you, right? So this is what matters. These different ideas. And it's tied to her career because that's how they get into the discussion, right? So it's something about how her career, and we talked about this a little bit last time, alters or informs whatever their marriage is. It's changed somehow, or at the very least, it's helped them and us along with them realize that they have different ideas of what a marriage should be. So let's talk about this a little bit. We talked all about McClane last time, and we're only just now talking about Holly, but I think we know about both. We can kind of sketch these out. I don't care who you start with, Holly or McClane. What do you guys think they want out of a marriage? Maybe we'll start with McClane because we talked about him last time. I feel like we know the most about him. Given, for instance, what he and Argyle talk about in the limo. Remember, Argyle's trying to make jokes. You thought she'd come crawling back. He says she had a job, turned into a great career, like all this stuff. Like, it's clearly on his mind. What's the impression you get out of McClane that he wants out of a marriage, probably?
He wants the girl, or he wants Holly to allow him for everything.
Yeah, he wants to be the breadwinner. He wants to be the quote-unquote man of the house. But in that 1950s, early 1960s kind of classic stereotype, if she works, like if he'll allow it, perhaps, if you want to go that strong, it would be a job, not a career. You guys understand the difference? Most, if not all of you right now, if you have a job, it's probably not a career, right? It's just a place you work because you can pay for food type thing, right? He's cool with that because there's no power in that, ultimately. You have a career, now you're inviting this idea of independence, all this other stuff, you get real power. Seems like maybe he's not cool with that. And that helps us think about pretty clearly what Holly wants. She has a different idea of marriage. And we don't know as much because we've only started talking about her today. But given what we know about her, given that at the very least she hardcore disagrees with McClane, right? What do you think what's her picture of a marriage?
When you imagine she's wanting to be happy, she probably like.
Well, what would happiness look like though for
It
her?
could be anything.
No. We know some things.
She wants him to be supportive of his job or career or whatever.
Yeah. She wants to be not just allowed to have it, which right now it seems like that's actually a problem. But beyond that, I think she would like a little bit of support in it. And look, it looks like she's crushing it. She's doing really well. Could you shut the fuck up and let me do well? type of thing. Yeah. And again, this can be harder to appreciate in 2022. 1988, we were still in the early versions of not just women having careers, but some dudes being okay with it. And if McClane is going to get defined, as I'm kind of arguing to you he is, in the early parts of the film, as mostly this very traditional, we talked about that a lot last time, traditionally masculine guy, all the stereotypes you kind of think of, that's not going to really be down with a woman having a career like this, making more money than he does, so then at least financially having more power than he does, right? That's not going to sit well. And what I'm telling you is, I think there's an internal conflict. Take you back to Senior Lit for a second. There's obviously external conflict. That's what makes the movie awesome. But there's internal conflict with McClane, specifically, he's our main character, in trying to deal with that. How's he going to square that in his mind? And my argument to you today, by the end of today, is going to be, I think in the best way he can, comes around to that notion. And that's what we watch through the film. Does that make sense? So generally, that's the biggest takeaway from this scene is there's a marriage plot at the center of this movie that I imagine no one has ever really pointed out to you before. It's pretty important, actually. Anything else that struck you from the scene? Something somebody said, the way something looks or is shot, or what's up?
The way her assistant cuts them off right after Holly
Yeah.
makes her final words, and then she comes in and she comes in all happy, but then she hesitates and she looks at him, and then McClane kind of goes "What are you doing?"
It gets sassy. Yeah. Well, not just the assistant, before her too, the couple, I guess we'll call them. The two people. There's so much to say about. All right. So first of all, the two interruptions we get in this scene are both. The only thing they really have in common is it's the corporate world. You know what I mean? First, it's two people from the Christmas party looking for a place to. Well, you see what they're doing. Not long after this, they're fucking. That's what they're looking to do, which is interesting considering what's going on. I don't know if you know that married people do occasionally do that. That's when she says "I miss you" like that. There's a tinge of Christmas throwdown baked into that. I'm just this is part of it. It's important. The corporate world is invading. These two younger people are invading their space, just looking to throw down. And it interrupts, importantly, just as you put it with the assistant, it's right when, I want to say it's right when she says, "I miss you." She says, "I miss you," and they barge in. And you could argue that reminder, this corporate intrusion, and the frivolity, the way they're just gonna fuck with abandon type of thing, not conservative, not traditional, right? Pisses McClane off. Reminds him of all the ways his life is different now because she works at this place and she has this career, and that they represent that when they sort of inject themselves accidentally, right? Because right after they leave is when he says the stupid thing about last name, checks. Let's talk about that for just a second. We talked about last name last time, but we can bring it up real quick. Why does that upset him? That helps us think about what he wants out of a marriage, first of all, right? What's the deal with the last name? She's supposed to have his, right? According to him. Well, what kind of argument might you start to make here based upon that? Why do you think it matters so much to him?
It's almost like she's trying to break up her marriage. That's usually the first step.
It's not a good sign. To be fair to McClane, it is for sure not a good sign, especially that she does it without telling him. But of course, you could also make the case that she doesn't tell him because she knows it'll piss him off, because it does. But before all that, rather than worry too much about practical arguments, right? Because they're always there. Theoretical ones. What is, in this scene, Holly taking his last name for a guy like McClane with the kind of motivations he seems to have in the early part of the movie, what is that? Because it for sure, yeah.
Like she don't need it.
That independence we talked about, it's pretty symbolically sort of laid out with the change of a last name. Sure. You're literally tied to someone when you have their last name. You may have brothers and sisters or whatnot, right? You got the whole thing. But when you change it on your own too, you do it independently. It could be a marker of that independence, which we talked about McClane doesn't like, right? Because he's supposed to be the head of that household, and there's no independence in that scenario. Good. Okay. If you wanted to go a little harder, and I don't know, you could make this argument. I just want you to know it's there. There could be a question of power here. There's an old school argument about, like, there was a big thing in the 70s and 80s with women going by their maiden names, and they'll still do it now. But this idea of power and who has it, and it's like an ownership thing. If you take his name, that feels a little cheesy to me, but it's there. It's an option you could consider. But at the very least, we're for sure talking about independence here. And that's a big sign of it. And it also tells us that he doesn't like it because he brings it up. But even more than that, it's how he talks about it. He doesn't just bring it up. He says the thing about, except maybe when you're signing checks. I actually have to ask real quick, do you guys even know what checks are?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I mean, I don't use them. I know they exist, just like, a liger exists, but I've never seen one. So that's a lion and a tiger. Anyway, what does it tell you about his concerns? He's worried about independence, right? But it's tied to something else, or at least he ties it to something else. Money. And again, we're back to this idea of her career and that it offers her financial, specifically, independence. There's other ways to be independent, but many of you right now, even if you're living on your own, in the worst case scenario, you're also financially independent. That doesn't always feel very empowering when you're 20 or whatever. You would like to be financially dependent just a little bit in a lot of cases. I know I would have. It was hard. But she is. She doesn't need him. And that's where we come back to questions of power. I want you guys to understand, all the time, all the ways we're talking about independence, the inverse of that is to be dependent, right? Need him. And she doesn't. That upsets him, according to what he tells us, right? He implies she needs the checks from him. And that never gets addressed, but everything else in the movie tells us that's probably not true. Yeah? So, now it's just sad that he says that, Cool. Anything else from this scene? I got a couple more, but I'm interested in anything you guys noticed. We covered a lot of what was said, I believe. You could also argue, to return to something you said, I didn't touch upon the assistant enough. She's pregnant. It's interesting that the first interruption is like two couples about to throw down, and then the second interruption is a pregnant woman. There's all these ideas about, especially with the second one, like family or
Intimacy.
huh?
Intimacy.
Yeah, well, especially with the first, but the second one is like, if you think about all of this, all of McClane's discomfort in the early parts of the movie come back to violations of his like traditional worldview, right? This deeply pregnant woman working on Christmas Eve, interrupting their discussion when she should be at home, right? Like, it's another reminder again of just this whole world and this set of values that he is not happy about, because it's, from his perspective, you could argue it's like infected Holly in some way, right? It's got her thinking all these crazy thoughts where she changes her name and she has a life without him, and like, right? So it's another reminder, you could argue. And that's, every time they get interrupted, their conversation goes further and further south. So it's important to think what those interruptions are. The other things I would point out to you, can't see it here, but his mode of dress, I told you he looks more comfortable in this scene. He's wearing what is commonly known as a wife beater, which is an unfortunate name, but that's got nothing. He's wearing a white tank top, right? Like he's dressed down. He's very casual. He's not wearing shoes in this scene, even. He's literally made himself at home, right? He's in Holly's office. He feels safe. That's kind of nice. Despite all the stuff going on, you get all these visual cues that he lets his guard down in a way that he has not done up to now, right? And it's interesting, too, to see what a person looks like when you let their guard down. A dude walking around in no shoes and a white tank top, what are some pretty common assumptions we have with that outfit?
He's broke.
Do what?
He's broke.
He's bro? Okay, let's push on that a little bit. So like for instance, I think you guys would be pretty shocked if I came in like that. No shoes, tank top. It'd be weird. Why?
I wouldn't,
This is a school.
You wouldn't think it'd be weird?
I wouldn't take you serious.
You wouldn't take me seriously. Good. I think that's kind of, why not? Like what we're getting at is that there are some connotations around dressing like that, right?
You don't care
About what?
about what other people think.
Yeah. Now it's important to think about why. But there's for sure this nonchalance.
You don't value their opinion enough to.
Maybe.
dress up for them.
That's one. That's an option. That is an option. And you kind of get the impression that at the very least, McClane would like people to think that. He may honestly feel that way, but at the very least, you could argue he definitely gives off that vibe in the first 20, 30 minutes of the movie, right? What other connotations do we have around white tank top? I can't say it enough. No shoes, right? What are assumptions we make about a person who looks like that? And their life, huh?
Or,
Can you say that? Did you say that?
I said, did he already say that?
I don't think so. No. Yeah.
You did. You said it for him?
I didn't hear it.
Broke, bro.
Oh, that's not.
Poor, it's the same thing.
Okay.
That's not true. That's not true.
It's the same thing, different name.
No. Being a bro is a dude that like works out and potentially
Broke.
bleaches his hair.
Broke. With a
I heard
K.
bro. Well, you gotta enunciate then, bro.
Broke.
Broke is fair. So now we're talking about class. We already kind of touched upon this with the fact that Holly is pretty clearly not in that financial realm, right? And given her mode of dress, she takes herself, granted she's at work, but she takes herself very seriously. She's wearing what is commonly referred to as an 80s power suit, complete with shoulder pads. I'm not making that up. And yeah, the just luscious fucking perm, and she is ready to work in this particular field. McClane, on the other hand, is ready to drink Bud Light and pass out. Like that's kind of what he looks like. I don't think that's an accident. When it comes to making arguments about these texts, right? With a movie, visual phenomena are fair game as well. He is clearly wearing the uniform of like a lower financial class, right? And in this scene, at least, you could argue it gets tied to that traditional worldview, right? Whereas Holly and everything she represents with her mode of dress gets tied to this progressive, but I don't mean it like, and I'm trying to say it's better, that's just the term we have, this like progressive worldview. Like times are changing, it's 1988, you gotta get modern type of idea. In this scene, that's a pretty clear cut, right? So then, for the most part, everybody else in the movie, with some exceptions, who looks this way and acts this way and is of that world, kind of stands for that mindset. And anybody who looks like McClane, which is not too many people actually, kind of stands for his. And that to sum all that up, the idea that he's a fish out of water, he's going to look like that through the entire movie. In fact, in this scene, this is the best he's going to look because he gets really dirty, right? The whole time he gets really gross, picking glass out of his bloody feet and shit. Like he's not going to get any better from here.
Why do they do that?
The glass out of the feet.
No, like through the whole movie, they do kind of things like whenever he's talking to the bad guy and he like knows that he's pretending to be the bad guy, he like gives him a cigarette and he looks at his feet and he sees, and then I can't remember what McClane he says. And then whenever they're like 2 for 1 in the office, and he's like, shoot the glass,
Yeah.
he does it on purpose. Like, what's the whole point with him not having shoes throughout like the movie?
Ah, okay. Well, a couple things. Like in a practical sense, it's trying to show you he's a badass. I mean, really, like so many movies, they have to make the character heroic, especially a guy like this. He's commonly referred to as an everyman. I mean, I just said he's wearing the uniform of a guy who would pass out drinking Bud Light. That's not usually the dude you want saving everybody. So they have to have moments. There's another famous scene where he fingertip grabs an air vent that's like not humanly possible.
Oh yeah, he sold it, died into that.
Well, yeah. But so there's little moments like that are a bit much, where from a movie making standpoint, they want to make him more heroic, and there's that. For our purposes, from a theoretical standpoint, I don't know, man. I mean, I'll tell you this, quick sidebar, but it has a point. I gotta be careful because we're recording this. My son played a soccer team last night from a private school. My son's team is not good. They fucking destroyed this private school team. It was like I went to the coach at one point. I was like, hey man, I know you don't mean to do this. We got all our kids kind of up in a press. Can we pull one back just to like, they weren't making it across midfield. I don't know if you know anything about soccer. It was fucking brutal. It was brutal. And my son asked me about it. I was like, look man, I don't know how true this is. I try to be honest with my kids. It's like, there's an old idea that the less you struggle in life, the less capable you are. Like this, the softer you get. I feel like it's what we saw last night. And I say all that to say, you could argue that idea is going on here, given his mode of dress, given the fact that he appears broke. He's more capable than anybody else in the movie, right? Pick anybody else in the movie. Are they running through that class? No. I can't think of one person. I honestly can't. They're going down right there. That's the end of the movie. But he can. Because he's this low class, sort of coming out of the dirt hero. Like that's a very American idea. The whole American dream thing, one way to tell it is that you're so poor no one can fuck with you. Like I've seen shit, you can't make it any worse for me type of idea. Right? And I think the feet are and they want you to see them. Many scenes, like the one you point out, don't forget, he's got no shoes. That's a real thing. At least when it comes, because again, I'm not saying it's true or not, but when it comes to how we think about the world, like our culture, I think we still have that idea. Does that answer your question? Cool. All right, we spent long enough on this scene. Let's go to another one. What you're seeing, the end of this scene, Argyle's going to have his heroic moment. He's going to get Theo, I believe is the hacker's name. He's going to punch him out. And he's going to like, oh man. But it's like, all right, Argyle, good for you, man. The scene we're interested in is right after that. McClane and Hans and Holly. Finally, right? The climax that we are denied in Vonnegut. This is an action movie from 1988. We're going to get that fucking climax, right? Important thing to know, we will, after this, talk about the Yippee-Ki-Yay scene. But I only mention that because it does come in here. And there's something to be said about that we're not going to be able to say yet, because I think it will also help to talk about this immediately after talking about McClane and Holly, okay? But, in this scene, McClane is looking rough. Not just his feet at this point, all of them is not good. And I'm interested, I don't want to lead you too much, so I'm just interested again, anything you see, hear, notice, because there's a lot in this final scene for Hans anyway. Before we dive into your excellent observations, I like to tell people, the scene where they drop Hans Gruber, Snape, they really drop him like 30 or 50 feet or something into one of those huge pads. And they count to 3 and they let him go. That was the agreement. They drop him on 2. So the look on his face is real. That's real regret and terror and betrayal. Right there, where he's like, you motherfucker said 3. I love that. I like you guys to know that he was furious too, apparently. He was real upset. Anyway, all right, there's a lot in this scene. There's some things that are said that, again, unfortunately, we can't talk about to the length I normally would, although if we have time, and I hope we do, we're going to talk about Yippee-Ki-Yay right after this. But there's a couple, not to lead you too much, there's a couple visual things that occur as well that are pretty important. I'm curious. Anything you guys saw, thought about?
Well, him holding on to a watch.
Yeah.
There's a huge callback in the first part of the movie where that asshole getting a friend is like
Ellis.
Yeah, whatever his name is. He's like, oh, check out the watch. Show John the watch.
Show him the watch.
Yeah. And John
Yeah.
doesn't see the watch like at all.
It's what's the watch about? Let's go ahead and talk about like the significance. Does anybody?
It's a Rolex. It's very expensive.
She got it ostensibly for success in her. I'm trying to remember the line now, but Ellis says something like, you know, like it was like a celebration of some huge sale we had or something like that. So this watch is a literal marker of that corporate world we were talking about, and the fact that she's good in it, that she can operate well within it. But importantly, in this scene, it's less a marker and more a what? What does it become in this scene with Hans? I can never tell if he's holding it or if he's just stuck to it in a weird way. It feels like he's stuck to it, but
A little bit of both almost.
huh?
It's like a little bit of both almost. Like,
Yeah, it's not clear, and maybe it's better that it's not, because honestly, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like if you're holding on a 200-pound guy by a string, I mean, you probably maybe you don't have to lose the watch. So anyway, what is it in this moment with Hans attached to it? However it is he's attached to it. What's that watch become? Huh?
I'm trying to think of the word.
Well, why is it a problem that Hans is attached to it? We'll start there.
He's about to pull her with him.
Knowing what we do about gravity. Yeah. So the watch, it's not a handcuff, but it's kind of handcuffed her to this literal downfall that Hans is about to experience. So it's dangerous. It's harmful. It looks great because it is a Rolex. Look at the watch. Right? It's really nice. But that kind of, you could argue, the film is saying, disguises all these, again, these dangers that are hidden within that world, that mindset type of thing, as illustrated by Hans. Hans says at one point, he pretty much is a businessman. No, Ellis, that idiot, says it. Like, I do it with a pen, you do it with a gun, baby. You know, he says these things. I don't think he's wrong. The way Hans dresses and acts, he's a capitalist, right? You will see that if you look, even a little bit, and you will at some point. You'll do research. People talking about the watch, they will bring that up. And there are different things you can do with that. Primarily, you will run into articles where people will say the end of this movie is all about Holly taking her ideas about like being an independent woman and having power and just kind of throwing those away with the watch. You will read that. I'm not saying that argument isn't feasible. I am saying I think it's bullshit, but it's feasible. Okay? The reason I don't think it works, I almost never trust an argument that is that simple. And what I mean is, oh look, symbol, we're done. Like, that's almost never the case. Specifically because I want to talk more about this scene. Yes, and importantly, McClane undoes the watch. I don't think that's an accident either, right? So the people that argue, like, McClane is undoing this. He's getting her out, right? Basically, she's going to go be a mom now. She's going to, like, I don't know why I pointed at you. So, but, I mean, it hit me. I was like, there's no fucking reason to be doing that. But anyway, the reason I don't like that reading is because it ignores so much else about the scene. For instance, when everybody's laughing, I'll be honest, when Hans says yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker, I laugh a little bit too. At his British guy doing a German accent, I laugh a little bit too. It's a little bit silly. Yep. The laughter goes on for way too long. We can agree on that? Way too long? So much so, did anybody notice Holly's face as everyone was laughing and everybody had a gun but her?
She was just like, what?
She's like, what the fuck is going on? Very much so. Just like, something's not right. Does anybody catch what happens immediately after that? He does.
Oh, he grabs him.
Do you see what she does?
He does.
And she hits Hans's arm. And it's quick. And I've seen the movie way more than you, okay? But it's on camera. She goes like this, and you could argue he sees that. He yells her name. She does duck, give him more of a target, but also her arm comes up and hits Hans's because he's going to shoot him. I think that's important. To the people that you will read this, you will encounter this argument that the watch moment undoes everything, literally and figuratively, that we've talked about in terms of Holly and power and all that stuff. The fact that they will also argue that McClane saves her, that she's a damsel in distress. I guess we have to go back real quick. You can see it better in the previous scene, but her blouse or whatever, I'm not good with that language. I think it's a blouse. Is it a blouse?
You know, like what you can say. Like,
Anyway, there's buttons undone. There's buttons undone. It hasn't been like that in any other scene. It's right before this and this scene. That's the only time. And again, those people will argue she's a damsel here. She's announcing her femininity. She's more vulnerable, pretty literally, right? She's powerless. My argument is they're ignoring Holly. They're ignoring the fact that she plays a role in her own saving. And I say all that to say, I would argue they're partners in this moment. Does he save her? Yeah, he has a gun and she doesn't. That's kind of, it's not an accident too. When he throws down his first one, Holly goes, oh no, don't do that, you big dumb bitch. You need that. She makes a noise, but that's what she means. But I think it's important that she plays a significant role in this whole operation. I would argue they're partners in this scene. And so then it becomes, well, then how does undoing the watch play into that partnership? My point to you is it's more complicated than you have to be traditional or you have to be progressive. I think the movie is somewhere in the middle. And that's messy and that's harder to figure out. But when I tell you I don't trust super simple arguments, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's on either extreme. I think it's muddier. Anything else you guys notice in this scene? There's been a lot of me talking at you, but no. It's harder without yippee-ki-yay, but I also thought I wanted to talk about Holly more than we're normally able to. I don't even know how much into the movie. The bar on the bottom is weird. This is Ellis talking before he gets blown away. Don't worry about that. The scene we're going to look at, super famous scene. Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. If you're not familiar, it's a very famous line. It's basically McClane and Hans's first interaction. And interestingly, it's virtual, right? It's over a walkie-talkie, so they never meet until like Hans pretends he's somebody else, right? So they never actually meet, knowing who each other is, until the final scene. So it's an interesting thing about this movie. They're going to talk a lot. Most of this scene is really conversation, which I think you guys are more comfortable with. That's what we've done all semester, is words. So pay special attention to that. But of course, if you notice anything visual, I'd love to hear that as well. So it's pretty much all dialogue in this scene. I have a lot of thoughts, but I'd love to know yours. Anything, again, you don't even have to have an argument yet, but stand out as odd or interesting. You know?
Where Hans said, like, you're just another American boy who's seen too many movies as a kid.
Anytime, I mean this, anytime you're reading a book, watching a show, watching a movie, and they bring up movies or shows or books, alarm bells should immediately go off. Because they know, I mean, when this is occurring, there are theaters full of people going, oh, we're watching a movie right now, right? Like they want you to think about that, which is not typical. The point, generally, in any art, again, book, show, movie, whatever you want, they want you to suspend your disbelief, right? You're along for the ride. If you ever stop to think about it as a movie, all of a sudden you're not watching it, you're analyzing it. That's what they don't want. But here, for just a minute, they invite that. They ask you to go, well, let's think about this as a movie real quick. These are all actors. So there usually is a reason for that. They're trying to have you recognize something about something in the movie, some of the characters, something. Okay? Importantly, Hans is the one who says this. He says, and I don't know if I can do it verbatim, but just the product, just another American who saw too many movies, product of a bankrupt culture. You think you're Rambo, John Wayne, there's that guy again, right? What is Hans accusing McClane of?
Trying to be a hero.
Well, specifically what kind, though?
Like a movie hero.
Which is interesting because we know what?
This is a movie.
It's exactly what he fucking is. It's like, oh, Hans, baby, you got the wrong number. No, that's not it. Yeah. But again, it's weird because he's called. Look, if this were a true story, which would be wild, that'd be an interesting taunt. Imagine being in McClane's non-shoes, and you talk to the bad guy, and he's like, "You think this is John Wick, motherfucker? You think this is gonna go well for you? There's more of us. You're gonna die horribly." And you go, "Oh no, it isn't a movie, is it? Oh shit, I'm in a lot of trouble." Yeah. But what's the deal? You think now we can get into theoretical territory? He attaches that to America and like how we think of ourselves or something. What do you think that's about?
Like, we think we're the heroes always. Like, pretty much.
Historically?
Yeah.
Yeah, to a degree, that's true, I think. Especially in 1988, we'd only been out of Vietnam for a couple years, like 10-ish. So yeah, there's something to that, I think. We got to square this, and I think we can. Line that Hans is drawing between that American ideal and our movies. What do you think Hans is suggesting? And we're going to come back around to the fact that he's the villain. It's important that he's the villain. We can't forget that. But just right now, we have to consider his idea.
It's just like when you watch too many movies as a kid, you want to grow up to be just like that.
Yeah.
He calls him like an orphan.
Orphan of a bankrupt culture. Yeah, he's had no real parenting, basically, is the implication. He's just had movies.
Your parents.
Huh?
It's like movies were your parents. It's like no one taught you that this isn't what real life is like.
Yeah.
The bad guys are going to win. Basically saying like,
Bad guys can win at the very least.
He's like, you're not going to win in this situation. This is a movie. I'm going to win.
Yeah. And again, what's super fun about that is at the end, it's like, oh shit, it's the movie. It's a movie at the end. Basically. He even blows on the gun, right? Like you would do in an old Western.
While Holly's falling out the window.
Yeah, well, he's got to have his moment.
Squeeze in some line real quick.
Yeah. So my point is, I think Hans has a bit of a point, right? Like, I don't think he's entirely wrong. But it is interesting that he is a deeply stereotypical European character. He's just from Europe. You know, at one point they give you a little bit of backstory on him, but like I think he does a great job attempting a German accent as a British guy, but he's just a European man. Like that's his. Where is he from? Europe, basically. so there's this kind of us versus them mentality. It invites patriotism when you have a villain who's from somewhere else.
Yeah, I was gonna point that out. I don't think that like that was just like coincidental.
No, I don't think so either.
And especially like the year the movie was made in,
Yeah,
it was like full on America.
there's a little bit of like USA,
Yeah.
like bait. But I mean, even more than him, Carl. I can only describe him as a Viking. The dude with the super blonde hair.
And the long.
Yeah, super jacked.
He's like the cool gun.
Comes back from the dead at one point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy. I think all that's intentional. But it's still interesting that Hans makes a good point about the very movie we're watching. This is a harder question. Why do you think he does that? He's saying bad guys can win in real life, which they can. This is not a movie, so that means you're fucked. But then we watch the movie, and the bad guys don't win. They almost do. They come really close, but they don't. What do you guys do with that? That's weird, right? Why call itself out as a movie if it's just going to end like all the other movies? I guess the question I'm driving at is it different in any way? Because otherwise it's just insulting itself as a movie for the sake of insulting itself. Does anything feel different about, and this will be hard for you probably, but like old movies, old westerns, older action movies. I don't know if you've ever seen many of those.
That I think it tells too seriously.
Yeah, well, it's just like the good guys always win, but they always win. Like, it's never really in doubt.
I was about to say, I think it's because like he doesn't really have a lot of chance. Like it's kind of all the odds are really against him.
You could easily see him like being discovered at the end of the movie at a bottom of an elevator shaft.
Yeah, like he's one guy and has like 3 clips in a C4 versus like
Yeah.
12 terrorists.
Well, and the lengths he has to go to, it's never just
Yeah.
a shootout. It's like having to jump off the fucking roof with a fire hose, like, or the packaging tape, which, by the way, my favorite scene in the movie would have been him getting blown, like shot to death, trying to get that off his back. Packaging tape is not a joke. Like, you gotta want that. Imagine trying to, anyway. I think, there's something here about thinking about the audience's expectations. Because whether you recognize it or not, you've seen a lot of hero movies. They're pretty big right now. And they have a lot to do with action movies from this era. These movies have a lot to do with westerns from the 60s and 70s. Right? But I'm saying there's a line from those westerns through movies like this to like the Avengers and stuff. Like, they all build off of each other. And pretty foundational to that is that heroes don't lose. And even if they do, they're going to come right back. We're going to make Endgame, or whatever. Like, there's going to be a moment where they win. These movies are the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. Okay? And when the bad guy is talking shit about America, we all go, it's kind of true. Fuck him for saying it. Right? But, hey, double trouble for you. You are in a movie, Hans. Best of luck, buddy. There's something here about... There's all kinds of arguments you can make. I'm super worried about the time. What time is it? 12:02. One of them is that even when we, as a culture, recognize the power that these films have on us, because they do, I think most of us, when pressed, would agree we depend a lot on movies for like what we know of the world. We really do. Movies and shows and whatnot. But even when pressed by the bad guy, it's weird that in the end, he is in a movie. Like, the world that he's saying exists doesn't. Right? He's like, you don't get it. This is the real world. And we're in the audience going, no, you don't get it. The world is fake. The world is a movie.
Like more like dramatic irony in a way.
In a way, but I guess what I'm saying is, if you take it that far, the dramatic irony is on us as well, because we're saying we're in the real world, while we believe these myths, right? That's pretty trippy, especially for a 1988 action movie. The other stuff they talk about. The most famous line in the movie, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker." What is that, you think? It's a quotation of two halves, yes? We all agree yippee-ki-yay is super different from motherfucker? Very different? Let's start with the first one. Yippee-ki-yay. You don't know what that is. I think you got a pretty strong idea of what that is, though. Given what they're talking about. John Wayne, Roy Rogers. He mentions Gary Cooper at the end. Who says yippee-ki-yay?
Cowboys.
Cowboys! Again, I grew up on Westerns because my dad was weird. And you may never have sat down and seen one, but you've seen more than you realize, right? You've seen commercials. You're flipping through, you catch TBS for a second, all they do is show that shit sometimes. Like, you've seen enough to have the image, right? Yippee-ki-yay! And they got the hat off and the horses rearing back and they're gonna, you get it. Motherfucker is super different. What is that about? When he says it, it's right here. It's like he's saying it to Hans and then he slips off. Why does he say it, do you think? We'll start there.
Just to, I guess, to show that he like doesn't care. Like he's fine with dying, like fighting.
In the words of Kirk Cousins, if I die, I die.
Yeah.
If you guys don't worry about that, but that's a real person who said that. Kinda. I think we might
I
have
think
time.
it's kind of like funny, honestly.
Oh, for sure. Here, let's.
Let me at a loss. You know my name, but were you?
Just another American who saw too many movies as a child. Another orphan out of bankrupt culture that sees John Wayne, Rambo, Marshall Dillon.
I was always kind of partial to Roy Rogers, actually. I really like those sequence shows.
Do you really think you have a chance against us, Mr. Cowboy?
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Okay. It is funny. I think it's meant to be. And there's a little bit of like laughing in the face of death is kind of what you're getting at, But you can pretty clearly see, I would argue, why he says, at the very least, yippee-ki-yay. Again, we're going to get to motherfucker. Why does he say that?
Because Hans calls him cowboy.
Mr. Cowboy. Yeah,
I kind of feel like McClane says it in a way where he's like, bring it on then.
for sure.
Because he's like sarcastic with it, but like serious.
Yeah, well, and so it's kind of combined with, so he's for sure laughing at death, but it's in that way, like as a middle finger type of thing, right? So the Mr. Cowboy part makes sense. He could have stopped there. Motherfucker is weird. I've seen a lot of those movies. I've never heard John Wayne say that. That would be wild. What is that? Understand this. I've gone all semester wanting to have this conversation with you because I knew that we would today. Motherfucker, what's that about?
It's on spin on it.
Good.
It's like that's his flair.
I was gonna say he's showing Hans that like he's not like he's not a typical movie hero.
Things are a little bit different.
He's just him. He's
Well,
like,
that's fair. Well, to a point, but he's, I would argue, in a body paragraph, for instance, yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker. Given the context, the Mr. Cowboy, it is what you guys are saying about, the first is, it's a middle finger to Hans. Maybe you're right. Maybe I am a cowboy. But the motherfucker is his own addition, his own flair. I like that term very much. It's somehow, my argument is, if yippee-ki-yay is John Wayne, all this, and it is, basically, okay? What we have left, motherfucker, is McClane. Whatever that means, whatever it stands for, that's who McClane is. That's how he's not just one of these cowboys that Hans says he is, right? So I'll say again. What is motherfucker? You know? Who talks like that? What awful, evil person uses words like mom and fucking in the same? It's a compound noun, motherfucker. It is.
Same guys who drink Bud Light and pass out.
We're like,
Ah, okay. So this is a marker of lower financial standing. Yeah. And in the same way, we talked about the lack of shoes. Some of his speech patterns, you could say, also reflect his the fact that he's not cultured.
Lack of etiquette.
There you go. Very nicely put. Yeah. The argument here that the film is making, okay? He gives us that addendum. One thing you can take away from that is it's because of that addendum. Just like we talked about with the shoes. It's because, yeah, he grew up on movies, all right, but also fuck you, right? Like, it's that. Because the real world that he did come from was the kind of world that makes a guy who says motherfucker, right? That's what's going to get him over the top. That's what's going to get Hans in the end, is the motherfucker part. What I'm telling you is, motherfucker is the American dream in this movie. But coming from nothing and beating people in smart suits at their own game, because you've lived through some things, that's motherfucker. That's your USA in this movie. It's an American term, by the way. Motherfucker. We invented it. I'm going to talk about this for a second. You just got to listen, I guess, because you're not... Hear me out. We don't even speak our own language. We speak English from England. When we first got here, we were colonies. At some point, they were like, man, we need like American literature. We need our own books, you know? We just kept reading British people because they were better at it. They've been doing it longer. When you read Walt Whitman in school, if you're made to do that, you do that because he was recognized as the first legit American lit. He was the first one. Everybody was like, even the people in Europe were like, that guy's badass. And I said, you know, like, that took hundreds of years for us to get to that point. And my point is, motherfucker is one of the words we added to the lexicon. It's like a big American flag in the middle of that sentence.
It's not the worst insult you can throw at somebody.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah, fuck your own mom.
But if you said it in like Sweden or something, they'd be like, what? You know, what did you just say? Because it's an American thing, right? That's ours. Anyway. All right. For next time, 'cause I'm sure we're almost out of time. Yes? Whew. All right. I should have warned you about the lights. I apologize. For next time, let me see. I got a lot of notes. Is this the one? This is the one. All right. Look over the proposal prompt. The proposal, I believe, will be due next time. All I've tried to do in these past two classes is have you see all the options you have. And it sucks because there are so many scenes you can talk about. I would love to talk about Al, specifically the scene where he gets introduced when he's in the convenience store and the clerk is really weirdly insulting to him for no reason.
Immediately.
Yeah. There's all kinds of stuff. Like basically every scene in this movie, I mean this, you could talk about in the same way that we talk about in class. That does not mean you have to talk about every scene. But if you just go looking, you're liable to find something, okay? The way I want you to talk about them is the same way we've done it all semester. Don't talk about the whole scene. Find a detail or two. Does somebody say something? Or do you notice shoes and the lack of them? Or do you know, like anything you pick up on, one or two details in a scene, that's enough for a body paragraph, say, right? You're not necessarily writing me body paragraphs in the proposal, but when it comes to thinking about what you might want to write about in this paper, that's where I would start. Start with a scene or two that you notice something and you have thoughts about. It might tie into something we talked about in class. It might be something totally other. Again, there's a lot of stuff in this movie, we have not had time to talk about in 2 classes, okay? Anything at all, I want you to try to put those thoughts down. That's what the proposal is for. It's just kicking into the paper mode in some kind of a way, right? We have anything else? Oh, we're gonna look at the bib prompt for next time. It's the same prompt. So if you looked at it before, you've looked at it. Any questions, thoughts, concerns, ideas before I let you go? I mean this. Anything at all?
I think that was like one thing we missed in the very last scene.
Okay, yeah.
Whenever Han's just like, this isn't the movie where John Wayne rides off into the sunset.
Yeah.
With the girl. That was it. I
Oh.
thought
Oh, yeah. Well, we couldn't talk about it because we haven't watched this yet. Yeah. He brings the cowboy stuff back up. And what, of course, what's funny is he does ride off with the girl,
Yeah.
right? We also, kind of remind me next time because everybody's ready to leave now. There's a very interesting thing in the next scene, which is the final scene in the movie, with Holly and like, when they finally meet Al, McClane goes to, he said, oh, this is my wife, Holly Gennaro. And you're like, oh shit, he used her name. He's growing. And then Holly goes, McClane. And you're like, what? So that's pretty important. We have time to talk about it. So I would add, and then I'll let you go. He does ride off in the sunset, kind of. Although it's night. It's snowing, which is Christmassy, but it's just all the money that's burning out of the building. They ride off in a busted limousine with a woman who has only just now decided to accept his last name after it seems like he's come around on letting her be more independent. Like, it's not quite the same as John Wayne or whoever riding off, right? Like, it's my point is, it's been updated for the late 80s and the new world that exists. All right, I'll see you guys Wednesday. Thank you.